Hello, my darling sinners. I am Lila Susanna, fallen angel of the night, and usually a light novel reviewer. But today I'm trying something a little different. So, some of you might have seen that just the other day I released my first ever music track. Mm. So, I wanted to take the time today to kind of break that down and go through some of my creative process and some of the music theory behind it as well. Because I know there's a lot of people who want to get started in music composition, but are a little scared by it. So, yeah, um, this was originally meant to be a stream, but my ISP kind of gave up the ghost a bit. So instead, I'm going to do this as a pre recorded video, which you're watching now. And it's going to be a little bit more ad hoc and less scripted than my usual videos as a result. So, yeah, let's get started. So, this is my very first track. It's called A Fair Night, and it's kind of a lo-fi hip-hop kind of track. Very generally simple, I would say. Not a lot of musical complexity going on there, but it is my very first track ever. So I thought I'd go through a little bit of my musical background to begin with, just to get you up to speed with kind of where I'm coming from, I guess. Excuse me. So in high school, I did a lot of musical performance, not with a piano or a guitar or any kind of common instrument like that. No, it was with not even with something that's typically part of an orchestra. And so that was kind of looked down upon by my music teacher in high school. I did a fair amount of music theory, but my music teacher wasn't really interested in teaching us properly. So I just kind of sat there going through these music theory books, never really putting any of it into practice so much. There's a big difference between playing music and composing it. And while I had, I guess, all the puzzle pieces, I didn't know how to fit that puzzle together. So I came out of high school kind of a bit disillusioned with that whole thing. But at university, I tried to do some music papers. But my university music school was very elitist and wouldn't let me do any. So that was really disappointing and very disillusioning for me. So I kind of gave up music for the last 13 years or so. And it's only really recently that I've kind of picked it up again. I used to look down on electronic music, I'm ashamed to say. You know, that kind of elitism in a lot of the traditional music spaces kind of rubbed off on me, even though it disgusted me. And yeah, it wasn't until really a few years ago when I was listening to Spotify playlist to chill out to, and some, you know, kind of lo-fi hip hop came on. And I was sitting there listening to it and I thought, oh, what have I been turning my nose up at? You know, like, this is really good. Like, it's maybe got a repetitive beat to it, and parts of it are quite repetitive, but the complexity of the composition is there. Like, it uses things other than like varying up the melody to keep it musically interesting. And that was a bit of an epiphany for me. And so I really got hooked on this one artist, City Girl. City Girl kind of started off doing more lo-fi hip-hop kind of stuff, but she's kind of branched out into doing more just like generally chill electronic music. I wouldn't really classify it as lo-fi hip-hop necessarily. It's got some of those aesthetics still, but she's made it her own thing, and it's been really inspiring for me and really turned my opinion on electronic music. So yeah, as a result of that, I started doing more digging, and I got kind of turned on to Andrew Huang and his Four Producers One Sample series, and I was like, wow, these people are doing so much with just like this one little snippet of sound or snippets, you know. And I was like, what? This seems like it might be something I could do. I started watching Andrew's production and music theory videos, and I was like, wow, this is actually even kind of accessible to get into, you know? There's a lot of free stuff out there, and Andrew's got all this info there on how to use it. So I was like, what am I waiting for? And so one of my good VTuber friends, Zin, was putting his music out there, and I thought, you know, why don't I try it as well? Not just to jump on any bandwagon, but yeah, like his bravely putting stuff out there was really an impetus for me to do the same, I guess. And so yeah, I started looking into it and started playing around with digital audio workstations. Settled on Reaper, being one of the cheaper but better options overall. And so yeah, that's kind of my journey, my musical journey as such. So yeah, let's talk about the track itself now, shall we? So yeah, A Fair Night is in a musical key called A minor pentatonic. Now, this might not mean much to a lot of you, and so I wanted to kind of go through what that means from kind of a first principles kind of perspective to help those people who really aren't familiar with a lot of music theory at all. So yeah, let's start from the very top, shall we? So Western, well, any music generally is played in a particular key, and that key gives us a scale of notes in which to play a tune. So the most common scale is the C major scale, which sounds like this. So that's 7 notes ascending from a C to the next C. So what do I mean by scale? Scale's pretty much what it sounds like. It's a series of notes, and we base all our scales on what's called the chromatic scale, which is what's called 12-tone equal temperament. You don't need to worry about what that means, but basically between one note and the next note of the same name, there are 12 tones. So this is what the chromatic scale sounds like between C and the next C. So as you can see, the piano is pretty much set up for playing the chromatic scale. And yeah, as you can see in this Wikipedia article, actually, up the top right here. So how do we use that chromatic scale? Well, from those 12 notes, we take a particular interval between them to form different kinds of scales. So the most common ones are what are called diatonic scales. So diatonic scales are scales of 7 notes in that chromatic scale, and they have 5 tones and 2 semitones in them. And by tones and semitones, I mean, is there a tone is, sorry, tone is 2 semitones, right? So C to C sharp is a semitone, but C to D is a tone. So we define different scales by those different types of scales by those different intervals. And so a major scale in particular, one of the most common ones, is a tone, sorry. Right, so C to D is a tone, D to E is another tone, E to F is a semitone because there's no black note in between here. F to G is a tone, G to A is another tone, A to B is another tone, and finally we end with a semitone. So you can see here in this table, kind of that's what gives us our definition of a major scale. So if we were to pick a different note to start with instead of a C, like this G here, we can form a major scale starting with a G, or otherwise known as G major. So looking at our interval here, we have G to A is a tone, A to B is another tone, B to C is a semitone, C to D is a tone, sorry, where am I? Yeah, D to E is another tone. Oh, but what's happening here? We need a tone, but it's only a semitone to F. So we go to F sharp and then a semitone to finish back to G. So that's G major. So we can actually change how these intervals are laid out from our note that we start with, and that gives a different kind of flavor to how it sounds. But for a beginner, you don't really want to care about most of these. Generally, most Western music, at least, is in a major or a minor scale. And people will generally categorize major scales as sounding happy and minor scales as sounding sad. And that isn't quite right, but it kind of gives you some idea. So what's called the relative minor to C major, that's our C major again, is A minor. And by relative minor, I mean it can be played with the same notes that C major can. So A minor sounds like this. Sorry. So just by starting at a different place on the keyboard, we give quite a different feel to it. So if we play a chord in C major compared to a chord in A minor, they have quite a different feeling to them. And that quality lends itself to music composed in those scales. So now we know what an A minor is. It's that scale there again. What does it mean when I say A minor pentatonic? Well, you know, going back to that chromatic scale, I've said we can derive any kind of scale from this, most common being these diatonic scales. But that's just something kind of arbitrary, right? They're things that sound the best, but they're not necessarily the only scales we can play. We could have an 8-note scale or a 2-note scale. Like we're just going to play in C and D the whole time. Or we can have a pentatonic scale. So that can be any 5 notes in that chromatic scale, right? But what A minor pentatonic is specifically is A, C, D, E, G, and back to A. So that is quite different sounding. By leaving out that E and that F, we actually leave out something that we often try and avoid in music, depending on what kind of piece we're playing, I guess. And that's kind of disharmony. So if you play an A and a B together, it sounds quite clashy and quite tense, right? Same with a A and an F. So leaving those two out still sounds pretty good playing these other notes of the A minor pentatonic with that A. You know, we can make quite a nice melody out of that with just those notes, avoiding that B and that F. So this is a scale that's used quite a lot in blues and quite a lot in just guitar pieces in general because it's fairly easy to play on a guitar. So it's used in rock music especially. So I picked it for this piece because A, it's quite simple, avoids those horrible sounding notes, and it's less less notes to have to worry about composing a melody, right? And it adds a certain kind of I don't know, like a nice kind of airiness to it. Yeah. So I've kind of talked about a bit about discordant kind of notes and it creating tension. So I guess the approach that I have to music composition is that changing different things in music creates different levels of tension and release from that tension. And yeah, that clash in tones is one kind of method of adding tension, but also just like volume can be a source of tension. or even just like ascending pitch, you know. So, yeah, the approach that I have to composing is kind of playing around with that tension and kind of either emphasizing it or trying to de-emphasize it, depending on the kind of mood that I'm trying to create. So, because the piece that I wanted to compose for my first track was quite a chill one, that kind of lent itself to picking this pentatonic scale that avoids some of that tension. So yeah, let's switch over to Reaper now, where we can see the whole track. Cool. So this is all the parts of the track. I can play a bit for you, if I have remembered to add. Nope, I forgot to add audio output capture. Okay, now it should play something. So that's that melody there with the piano is all playing. Oops, sorry. All playing with those notes, just at a different pitch, different octave, I should say. But these chords are kind of cheating a bit. The root of these chords is all within that pentatonic scale, but the chords themselves aren't. Like they're playing notes outside of it. And that's kind of okay because, as it turns out, that pentatonic scale is just a subset of the diatonic scale, the A minor scale. So it still sounds okay playing that subset with, you know, these other chords underneath it. So something I kind of use to help me to begin with is these particular plugins called the Captain plugins. So I'll show you what those are about. So what these are is kind of, I don't know if cheats is really the word, but the helpers, I guess, that can help you with picking good chord progressions and composing drum beats and even melodies to exist within that the chosen key. So these kind of give you a starting point. They can't write the song for you, but they can help you get a starting point for when you're kind of, you know, floating on your own and don't really know entirely what you're doing, like me. Okay. You know, I've got years of music theory. What is it, 13 years old? music theory knowledge that I've mostly forgotten. But still, like, these plugins helped a lot. I didn't pay $99 for them at the time, they were on special, but even at $99, I would say they're very worth it to a beginner or even like an experienced composer for just helping find those ideas. So I'll show you what it looks like. So back in Reaper here, I'll show you how I've set Captain Chords in particular up. This was the, I used this and Captain Melody to kind of assist me in creating the melody there. But yeah, this really is only starting point. You can choose a chord progression, but then you kind of want to tweak like the rhythm of it and the complexity of the chords that it's playing, and like even change the chords that it gives you to sound better. So this this sounds like this. So you can kind of hear a rise in kind of not just the pitch, but the interval from this starting chord, which is actually the root of our scale, A minor. And it kind of goes up and comes back down. And that's kind of one of those examples of tension and resolving tension. So even though it's just like quite a short little passage, we've already kind of started playing around with the tension in our piece. And that's without making anything discordant or anything like that. And so from this output from Captain Chords, I've clicked and I've dragged this into another instrument rather than using their provided ones. So for the chords in particular, I used this instrument called Recycled String, which I modified a bit, which is part of the Lo-Fi Glow package from Native Instruments. So Native Instruments do a whole range of things. They make like hardware for electronic music production, and they also make plugins and synthesizers for that. And so as part of my MIDI controller that I bought from Native Instruments, it came with this plugin called Complete Control, which is kind of like it's a plugin for managing plugins, I guess, for managing instruments and like loops and like one-shot sounds and stuff. So yeah, it's a really useful thing, and best of all, you don't even have to buy a MIDI controller to get it. They have this thing called the Complete Start package, which is available free, and it gives you complete control plugin, and it gives you synths, sampled instruments, just a whole library of sounds to get you started with. And yeah, thanks to Andrew for mentioning it in one of his videos. But yeah, lots of synths, lots of sampled instruments, effects. If you've got an electric guitar and a audio interface that you can plug it into, you can put some processing on your electric guitar and record that through Reaper or any other digital audio workstation. Yeah, also a bunch of loops and samples. So that's all free, completely free. It's awesome. The stuff that comes with their hardware is a little more fully featured, but like this is more than enough to get you started. Where are we? Reaper. So yeah. Does that sound like? Sounds like this. Nice kind of spacey, airy kind of sound to it. I've also got what's called a little bit of automation on here. So what this is doing is it's fading in and out the low and high frequencies from the sound. So it kind of like changes up the sound a bit to just kind of create a bit of like audible interest kind of. Stop it kind of sounding the same when you're repeating the same chord progression over and over again, you know? So that's the chords. For the drums, I used another Native Instruments plugin called Machine. Now, this one, I don't think it's free. No, this one came with the MIDI controller. Oh. Yeah. So this has a bunch of drum kits and you can just like lay it all out there. So this is a fairly simple drum beat. Like I would not say I'm good at composing drum beats at all, but it was really easy to get started with this. Not bad, right? And so again, instead of pulling out the MIDI this time, I pulled out actual WAV files. Oh no, some reverb on it as well. Which, listening to it now, kind of sounds a bit over-processed. But it sounds okay with everything else playing. Yeah, what next? Okay, so yeah, I've got the lead and playing with the piano, and this sounds really pretty. Sounds like an actual piano, right? So that is done with another plugin. Oh yeah, here you can see Captain Melody. So this actually helps you with figuring out the tension. Though I wouldn't really rely on this too much because like with melody, it's it's kind of changing too quickly, you know? I mean, you don't want too much tension in there, so keep an eye on it, but don't like, I guess, like, yeah, don't worry about this too much. But yeah, with Captain Melody, you can see it's got notes that are kind of in harmony with the chords that you've picked in blue, ones that are slightly off in green, and these yellow ones are ones that are a little bit discordant. So you can see that, like, these discordant ones are kind of quick. So there's just that little flash of like, ooh, that's a bit like bit tense, but then you like immediately resolve it back down to something that's in tune with the chord that you're playing. So yeah. This version of the melody, I actually simplified a bit. It's not what's actually playing here. I think with this style of music, sometimes less is more, you know? So yeah, I actually simplified this down. And yeah, it's again coming back to that idea that Captain helps you get started with an idea, but it's not going to do all the work for you. And yeah, again, bit of reverb on it. Can't get enough reverb or something. So very simple. Oh, hang on. Ah, right. Okay, so in the Captain plugins, it does actually support third-party instruments. So I've so you can kind of see how it's nested in here. This is another plugin that I think came with my MIDI controller, another instrument, and it's a sampled piano. It's actually what I'm playing, yeah, with this on-screen keyboard here. So yeah, it's been sampled from an actual piano, and it sounds really natural and good. Good. Yeah, so this melody plays for not actually very long, just a few, repeats a few times. And then it goes into this other section with what's called arpeggios, which is kind of, instead of playing all the notes of a chord at once, you play them in succession and kind of go up and down a bit. So that's what's happening here. So I kind of think arpeggios are cheating a little bit in that it's just taking the chords that you've already picked in your progression and breaking them apart and just playing the notes of them in succession. It's like really a real simple trick, I guess, but it sounds really nice. But at the same time, it's not just that. There is what's called a counter melody playing. And so this is using a different instrument here. So yeah, the piano's just playing these arpeggios underneath this other melody. And they're just kind of existing alongside one another, harmonizing with one another, and just, yeah, it's nice. Well, I think so at least. So again, I used Captain Melody to help me a little bit here, but oh gosh, I don't think this is even matching the MIDI at all. But it kind of is. Okay. But yeah, I changed things after I set this up. It's actually not even got the full melody in here. But yeah, it's just using a preset sound from Captain, which is kind of nice. It's magic bells. But then, because I wanted to make things interesting for myself and just kind of play around with features, I took this melody that's playing in here and I routed the notes that it's playing to this other track here. And so you can see here that it's receiving from track 5 counter melody. And then what this track does, track 6, is I've got this set of effects on it. So this is quite funny. Instead of having complete control through a Captain plugin, I've got a Captain plugin through complete control to get that magic bells sound again. But I don't think I really needed to do that actually. Anyway. So what this has done is this MIDI transpose notes is it's taken the MIDI notes that it's getting from track 5 and is transposing it up 12 semitones. If you remember back on our chromatic scale, 12 semitones is the amount of semitones before we hit the next scale up, or next note with the same name, shall we say. It's actually called an octave, not a, what would it be? Heptoctave? Because it counts the tones. Or it counts the notes in the diatonic scale as opposed to the chromatic scale, because the diatonic scale is far more useful. Yes. So yeah, it's 12 semitones, but it's up an octave. Makes sense? Probably not. Move on. Again, reverb, yay. That has the effect of, oops, sorry. Effectively playing the same melody, but a whole octave up. So something like that. So that kind of adds a bit of fullness to the sound, I guess. I could have just like added, oh, let's open the MIDI up, shall we? I could have just added the notes in here up an octave. Like this is a C5, I could have added it as a C6 here. But I wanted to play with the features. So yeah, that's the counter melody. There's a little bit before those arpeggios as well, during the normal melody. Yeah, so that's just, again, another layer which adds a bit more variety to the track as you're listening to it, rather than just repeating the same thing over and over without variation. There's also these ghost bells in here, which is using a plugin from Spitfire Audio. Now, Spitfire produce these free sampled instruments called laps, and they are just stunning. So you can get all these for free. They're kind of big on disk space because they're sampling actual instruments, but they sound amazing. Like, yeah, some nice handbells. Or what's this? Just something nice and atmospheric. There's a nice piano in here. Where are we? Soft piano. Yeah, really nice. Strings. Cellos. Even a drum kit. Really good. Highly recommend using those. Pros even use them a lot, you know. Yeah, so this is using some handbells, and that kind of adds this kind of spooky, kind of atmospheric tone underneath the melody. And also what I've done here is played around with the panning. So you might be able to hear it, especially if you're wearing headphones, but it kind of moves between one side and the other. And that just kind of, again, adds that little bit of variety to keep things interesting. Stop your ear getting fatigued of the same thing playing repetitively. There's a little bit of this weird, like, kind of instrument playing underneath, which you don't really hear too much in the actual track unless you're really listening out for it. And it just kind of adds a bit of texture to the whole thing. It plays a little bit different here. Yeah. A really simple bass line, which is just effectively playing the first note in each chord. Nothing very exciting, but again, just adding that little bit extra to the track that might be missing with everything playing up in the top registers there. What else? I think that's pretty much covered it. It's a little bit of a what's called a riser in here, which is again a different kind of tension. It's quickly increasing the pitch of a note. It's only up a single tone. It's from I think it's from is it a G to an A? But it just like that increase kind of as you almost rising up from your seat, you know? And it just, yeah, it creates that bit of tension before it kicks right back into the normal track and the drums kick in and that sort of thing. So yeah, again, just a little bit of increasing the tension, then resolving it, but nothing too drastic. You know, it's not that kind of track. Oh, and there's a little bit of like, I don't know, just gain a little bit of interesting stuff going on. Yeah, just a cool kind of weird echoey sound I liked. And that just sounds just kind of a nice little extra bit in the background. Yeah, and to kind of top it all off, the cherry on top as such, I have another free plugin called Vinyl from iZotope. So what this does is I've got it currently bypassed. It kind of adds that kind of like you're playing it on an old record effect. It compresses all the frequencies down, so nothing's particularly standing out, and it adds a little bit of snap and crackle to it. So it's like it was, yeah, composed back in 1960 and playing on an old record from then. It has a little bit of warp to it, a little bit of a warble, you know. Oh, if we go to where the drums are, I'll show you what it sounds like with it on. So everything's kind of on the same level, like nothing's particularly standing out here. But if I switch it off, you can really feel that that drum kick in there compared to this. And it's not what you want for every track, but it's kind of something that's a signature of the kind of lo-fi style. I didn't actually use this lo-fi button because I think it kind of makes it sound too digital. It's a bit weird. Yeah, I don't like that at all. Like that kind of, you know, analog feel to it. But yeah, that is A Fair Night by moi. Yeah, yeah, again, you can find it on my SoundCloud. I am releasing music under the name Night Lily, which is a literal translation of my name, just because I can. It's also on my YouTube account. Yeah, so it's up here on YouTube. It'll be better quality on SoundCloud. Yeah, hope you enjoyed that and hope you learned something or, you know, got a new appreciation for music out of it. I don't know. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed it and want to hear more. And yeah, I'll still be doing light novel reviews if you're here for that. But for now, I'll say goodbye. And remember, put no idol before God but me.